Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Writing Comedy, How to Make Your Horses Hilarious, the second, because for some reason they let us back again this year.
How dare they?
It can, yeah, sure.
Whatever you want, buddy.
So we'll not waste too much time here. We're going to go down the table with introductions, so you know who we are talking at you. Skywriter, would you like to lead us off?
Yeah, hello, I'm Skywriter. When I'm not writing Cadence Shining Armor Ship Fix, I sometimes do humor stories, character-based humor. I've written the story Duplicity. Most notorious for Princess Celestia Hates Tea, which is sort of a fan trope of subversion. Thank you. I'm glad you remember it. Sort of an escalation farce slash fan trope subversion. I also did a story called Shipping Sickness, which was just one long build-up to a stupid pun. Contraptionology, which was a sort of like a crack fic, but it sort of like had some adventure in it, but it's like was mostly funny, but had some serious stuff. Twilight Sparkle Learns the Feature Box, which got metafiction banned from fanfiction. Please helped in that.
If I'm not mistaken, back in the old days, this is what you cannot write, and then it's like metafiction, and it's a hot link to that story.
Yeah, it's just like saying, be sure not to write stories like this one, and he links to my story. It's like, thank you.
Actually, it was me.
Oh, was those
Yeah, it was like, what would be the perfect example?
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you for pointing out that my story is what you should not ever do. And then I've done a story. Yeah. And then there's a story called Mayor of Many Hats, which is more fan trope subversion, which is apparently one of my favorite things to do. Take it away, Wanderer.
All right, I'm Wanderer D, and apparently I'm some sort of parasite that sticks to panels.
How we got
anyway,
on this Gary,
I'm a moderator for filmfiction.net, and I write a lot of stuff that basically whatever I feel like writing. Comedy-wise, I wrote Wanderer D, the Human in Equestria Experiment, which is obviously meta. Something Spiky, which is a satire about Spike, going to the desert and growing up all cool and with, like Final Fantasy type clothes. And
oh, I thought he turned into a cactus.
Yeah, no.
That was.
I also wrote, like, in the random aspect of comedy, I wrote Helicopter Tank Castle of Scootaloo.
What?
Exactly. And I wrote basically one of those, this whole story is the setup for a joke. X is a changeling. And other stuff. I just carried it. I'm sorry? Yes, I also do those. Well, your mileage might vary whether it's actually funny or not. I guess it depends if I reference you or not in those, but yeah. How-to guides with obnoxious writer and clueless user.
Oh, I remember those.
Please.
Mike has taken my chair for the panel, so.
Oh, upside down.
He loves tiaras.
Don't invert the
Yes.
tiara. See,
Well, yeah. Give me a heads up. Yeah. Gotta wake you guys up somehow. No.
So
Whatever your question is, no.
So I'm Gary Oak. I've written a story called Twilight Sparkle's Not So Secret Shipfic Folder. I kind of exploited the whole secret shipfic train like right when it came out. I wrote a story where Spike has been kept up really late at night all the time by Twilight writing really loudly and furiously, and he's lost sleep for like a month, and he doesn't know why. And then he finally sneaks some of the scrolls she's writing while she's busy with it, and he finds they are really, really terrible shipfics she's been writing. So in order to get back at her, he decides to wake up bright and early while Twilight's sleeping in, because when you're up till 5 a.m. you're going to sleep all the time, and take all of the scrolls to the Ponyville flea market the next day and sell them, and kind of stuff ensues.
Write what you know.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. Thanks. I've also
I found that story to be very unbelievable. The fact that he was able to actually sell them.
Yeah. Fluttershy buys like 12. I don't know. Another story I wrote is a crossover between My Little Pony and The Room Called the Barn. It's exactly what you think it is. Shining Armor is Tommy Wiseau and Twilight is Denny.
Cool story, Mark.
And a story that's been in development, Tartars, for a while is called The Wicker Mane. It's exactly what you think it is.
Okay.
All
All right, I was going to say I was Sophisto, but I think one of you said I was my actual name. So I'm a bag of Vicodin. I work for Equestria Daily, and I also write fan fiction from time to time. I've written stories such as The Colbert Report, My Little Diamond. I threw a little comedy to Doomsday Arcade, and just a few other slice of life comedy-ish stories. And then I also do some episode follow-ups for Equestria Daily, as well as just a bunch of other stuff in the fandom. I lost track.
And I'm Shakespeare Cleese. Oh, thank you.
You got the one.
Yeah. I have 2 fans. Oh, awesome. I've written a lot of funny stories. Well, that's kind of like, if I do say so myself, and I guess I do. But all the stories that I have usually have some element of comedy in it, even if it isn't the focus. For example, with Regicide Squares, it was an action-adventure story, but the comedy was just kind of like the undertone to it, which is kind of, like my style, where it's, it's not meant to be funny, but someone will have a witty, remark or come back to it, and just kind of adds to a little flavor to it. Another story I did was True Love. It was a comedy between Mr. and Mrs. Cake, which was meant to be a comedy about, a hysterical day in the life of a married couple, where, for example, Mrs. Cake is sitting at the front counter selling things, and he's running around the kitchen, and she asks him to go do something from her seat, and he says, "Oh, no, by all means, don't get up. Whatever you do, don't let that chair float away."
I don't get it. Am I not supposed to?
Are you married? You'll get it.
And there's a little writing tip in comedy. Sometimes, in order to make something funny, you don't have to say anything. You just let the silence do it for you.
Yeah, don't worry, guys. I'm a prodigy up here.
He brings the funny.
So, why write comedy? Do you want to start us off, Shakespeare, please?
No.
Fine.
I write comedy because... See, this is why I didn't want to answer first.
The reason that I write comedy is that comedy is very cathartic, and it's also, everyone wants a good laugh. I believe we mentioned that last year, and it's still very apt, especially, nowadays with Donald Trump running for election, but, okay, no, sorry. Yeah, right? I won't get political.
And the joke's on us.
But no, comedy, just like all of the other tools in your writing arsenal, is the capability to spice up your story with more diversity and variety, both with your character interaction as well as your setting. In particular, you can have stories that are just basically all comedy, as Skywriter has done. You can have stories where you just have comedic bits in every now and then, kind of like the My Little Pony show does itself. And there's just a lot of variety and a lot of ability to throw in either small amounts or big amounts of comedy. And then you can funnel it in with a bunch of drama, sad, whatever it is else that you feel like writing.
Okay, I'm ready now. The reason why I write comedy is it's usually because I'm writing some other story, but comedy for me is just the language that I write in. It's like, why do you write English stories? Well, that's the language I speak. So anytime I'm writing a story, even a sad story, I put comedy in it because that's just always how I'm writing. I always have a one-liner ready to go. Anytime these guys are saying something, I've already got a joke ready to say. And when I'm writing, it always comes through. And sometimes even when it's not supposed to. And I've had editors saying, hey, listen, this joke in this scene is really funny, but it's kind of ruining the scene. It's kind of ruining the drama or the impact of the moment. So, I mean, as much as I love writing comedy, and I do, there's also times when there's times to not use it, which is just as important.
Yes.
From an entirely mercenary standpoint, making me sound like the most shallow and trivial person at this table, the comedy tends to also test well with audiences. People enjoy it with a lot less effort, a lot less emotional involvement. People tend to spread it around. It is a very popular form of fiction on FimFiction as well. So it is something that will tend to get you exposed to people. People don't say, well, this sounds like it's pretty meaty stuff. It's pretty difficult. I'm gonna maybe put that off till later when they say, if you'll see a comedy fic that says, yeah, that sounds fun. I'll just do it because people like to have fun. And so that's
you're such a sellout.
Yeah, I'm such a sellout. I totally am. I
Totally.
Yeah. So, but it's a good reason to write comedy. So,
I write comedy because I'm angry. and all the
It
time.
shows.
I don't know why I'm sitting next to him. He's gonna punch me in the face.
Here, you want to switch?
Oh no, dude!
And-
Like you
and
have
that-
you have the most punchable face.
And that would be funny,
Thanks.
ladies and gentlemen.
No, it's just it is part of the secret. Like if you're angry, sometimes you need to do something productive with that. And the best answer is like laugh and make people laugh. And sometimes you just make comedy out of something that really annoys you, and it just releases. Like the anger is gone, and then you just go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and wonder what you were doing.
There's also a lot of different types of comedy that focus on that sort of dynamic. Black comedy, I believe it's called a lot. Although that focuses more on depressing subjects, you can make anything funny, really.
Well, dark comedy is like food. Not everybody gets it.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So,
That was awesome. That was a good one.
I have to
Thank you.
echo what everybody else said. A lot of what they said holds true for me. Part of the reason why I think it's good to write comedy is we're writing MLP fan fiction, and that show is naturally infused with comedy. And if we want to write fan fiction that's kind of true to the universe, we're going to have funny moments, even in fics that aren't pure comedy, because we have a lot of comedy in episodes that aren't pure comedy, although we do have a lot of episodes that are just laugh out loud funny from start to finish. One thing I really like about comedy is it's a really, really powerful form of writing, in the sense that back in the old medieval times, there was only one person who could, talk smack to the king and not get his head chopped off, and that was a court jester who made fun of the king, but he could barb his comments in such a way that he could criticize the king through comedy, and comedy is still used as a form of criticizing, issues and people and just anything, and it's a really tough form to pull off, but if you do it, it can really get the message across, and good comedy can make you think. I also, I like all forms of comedy, like just silly stuff to the more the intelligent British humor, and I always like trying to get a cheap laugh from people, and I'm kind of like a bit of a clowny type person, and I hopefully am upbeat a lot of the time, and comedy just kind of comes naturally to me, so that's why I like it. And with that, let's move on to ways to incorporate comedy into your fics.
Ways to incorporate comedy into your fics. Yeah. Write jokes, make them funny, type them into no. It's like,
There.
I think that's
Write
it.
one word. Thank
We're
you.
done here. Another word. We're done.
Here's how to write comedy. Be funny. Okay,
Yeah.
panel over, guys.
Right.
With a keyboard.
Incorporating comedy into your fics, I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, it is something that, and this may be stepping on a topic you wanted to cover later, so I apologize on it. But
Oh, no.
it is incorporating comedy is. I mean, you can have a full-on comedy story, which is just funny. But it also is good. The concept of comic relief when you're dealing with a very heavy moment or a very heavy story, and you can actually just give the audience just a break for a moment, just like a little rest period, to stop, just a joke that's funny, that you can put in to just sometimes it just gives them a break from an otherwise very intense reading experience, and also can actually serve to make the next descent even more impactful and more interesting emotionally. Ways to do that. You have the comic relief. You have comic relief characters. That's a very old way of doing it. But I think the key here is to just sort of like delight your audience in a way that they didn't expect, to surprise them and and show them the truth of this character in just a surprising new way that sort of blindsides them, and that sort of makes them sort of light up inside. And I think that's sort of where I kind of try to go to with that. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, in my case, I think that it just depends on that story that I'm writing, the way that I incorporate it. Because if I'm writing a story, say, for example, Sparkle's #1 assistant, which is Rex from Mass Effect, is hatched instead of Spike. And he basically trains Twilight to be like a Commander Shepard type, like, the comedy there is, like, Sparkle, Shepard, like Rex, and it just sparks really from how incongruent it is to have a pony with, like, shooting guns in the middle of like modern day Equestria. Like her instead of like actually thinking things through and trying to make friends, her first reaction is to like go to violence basically. So like that is like putting the twist there, it's a different type than, for example, in one like my story Wonder the Human in Question experiment, which was basically just making fun of self-inserts, and how people just self-insert themselves into the story, and automatically they have their their cutie mark. They know exactly what to do. They know how to fly, use magic, etc. So when I ended up in Equestria because Luna poisoned my soup, and a series of other events, I don't know how to do anything. I don't know how to fly when I'm a Pegasus, so I die. I don't know how to use magic when I'm a unicorn, so I die. I decided that since I'm a pony, I shouldn't be carrying any sort of weapons, so I die. So it's a parody of that kind of thing. So to me, it just depends on the story, the type of comedic approach that you want to use to it.
Did you end up with your waifu?
I ended up marrying a whole bunch of mares.
Okay, well then that's a self-insert.
And I was female I was female at one point.
Wow, what a dream! What a dream!
I know. I did die most of the time.
Oh my God, I gotta read this.
I think the last time the last time they were burying me, I returned as a gravedigger or something like that. It's a complicated story.
Let's
right?
expedite the process here, guys. Let's just expedite it.
Yeah. He promises it's funny. I don't know.
It is not funny. It is hilarious. No, I'm I'm the experiment, because Luna thinks that humans can actually be, incorporate, not incorporate as ponies, but mix and they'll be friends and flies, and but she's trying to prove it by bringing me to Equestria, as each individual different thing. So when I arrive as a human, the first thing that they do is panic because I look like nothing that they would want to befriend. And so it's true, it's the really weirdest thing. It's like some sort of mutated minotaur that doesn't have any fur or anything. It's kind of why would you want to befriend that creature? And Wonder D is not the answer to that.
So, wait a minute. So if they don't want to be friends with you just because you don't have fur, is that why nobody likes Spike?
Wow.
Because I really feel like Spike deserves more love.
Spike is what?
Spike deserves more love, even though he doesn't have fur.
Who's Spike again?
Spike deserves more, I don't actually hate Spike despite what people say. I think he does deserve more love. Spike deserves love. Spike deserves love! Thank you.
You still haven't explained who Spike is.
He was that guy in Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, okay. Yeah, dude, that was an awesome series.
Every
I love
single
that.
Spike from Cowboy Bebop needs love. Spike from Little Pony needs love. Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he needs love.
Spike from Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Anyone play that game?
No.
All right, I'm the only one.
Well, he needs love too.
Yeah.
Do your thing.
Do the thing?
Yeah, do your thing.
Do the thing.
All of them, they all need love.
So, other ways to incorporate.
All you need is love.
Yeah, there you go. Other ways to incorporate comedy into your fic is this is more of a general writing tip that can go far beyond ponies. Is once you understand your characters really well and they have very fleshed out personalities, aka all of the main six especially, all you have to do is stick them into a scene and just let the personality contrast fly. That's all you have to do. Just think of a scene, stick two random mares in there, and you get like an odd couple type of pairing, and like odd couple in the comedic sense, and that is just natural, instant, easy comedy.
Yeah, that was like half of seasons 1 through 2 episodes.
Yeah, it's the reason why reason why Maud was so popular is because she played the straight person opposite Pinkie Pie. Like they were polar opposite characters, and that's why they worked so well together.
She's also the best character. That helps.
Maud rocks.
Who, the Mud Pony?
What?
Maud?
The Mud.
Yes,
Yeah.
Maud.
I think her parents hate her.
Wow.
Okay, the reason that I incorporate comedy into my fics is I mainly use it with the narration. I very much like to write both first and second person fics, and I feel that when you're capable, because I am inspired a lot by video games and the dialogue that comes with that, and a lot of really good video game dialogue, like Portal especially, is capable, we got the one over there, is capable of giving you laughs without having a reaction from the other character. So when you're using either a narrator in first or third person, you can have the words or what's on the paper be really funny, whether it's a reaction to an action it says, or if you're just explaining something really, really funnily, that's a new word, then you're capable of kind of enhancing the narrative. Like, it's not just a regular, oh, Twilight does this and Twilight does that, but if you're writing a story to where the story is still being told, but it's told in a different way, it also is way more memorable as a read.
Yeah, I mean, any professional comedian will tell you that 90% of the joke is in the timing, and it's especially true when you're writing it, because you can't control the rate at which somebody's reading it, so you have to break up the joke, whether it's something that somebody's doing or saying, with something that's interparsed with that, so that way, someone reads something, so-and-so says something, and then you have to describe some kind of an action to give it that pause, and then you hit it with the punchline. Sometimes that could be the entire story, where you start off with the setup, and then you have the entire story leading up to just a punchline. I mean, there's a lot of one-shot comedies that work like that.
Skywriter has written a bunch of them.
That's, kind of his bread and butter.
Yeah. But the thing about comedy is, you see it a lot with stand-up comedy as well as any comedy show that's actually funny, is that it's not the lines that is funny, it's the delivery of the lines. So even if you have the actors, the way that they portray the lines is what makes it funny. Like Maud's entire delivery in all of her episodes, like if the words on paper aren't really funny, but because she says it alongside Pinky and or Rarity, the contrast to that is what makes it hilarious, at least for me.
And that's one thing you have to watch out for, because if you look at comedy from different media and try and just write it as is, then you might not get the same delivery. You have to account for the medium you are performing the comedy in, and you don't have anybody to deliver your lines. So what you have to do is use punctuation, especially if you want to help with that timing. You can use em dashes. You can even have like a single word paragraph, something like that, if you want it to just kind of go off the page like that, or just little things. And another point I wanted to touch on is the power of contrast. If you do the same thing for an entire story, it could kind of dull it. So if you're writing comedy, you need some unfunny moments to kind of, brighten, like bring out the funny in the other moments. And if you're writing a dark story, you need some light in there too. So if it's just dark, it's just, okay, it's dark. You don't really feel the darkness.
Then it becomes Snowdrop.
You have to feel the
dark. Yeah, you got to feel the dark. Yeah,
you have to feel the dark.
You've got the light, and then.
Well, it's the way the show Futurama. It's the way that works, where it's in the future, and everything is amazing, and everyone is miserable. Like when Fry first gets to the future and he sees all this amazing stuff, his mind is just continuously blown for the entire first half of the season. But then after a while, he starts to get used to it. He gets used to all this technology around him, because people will naturally habituate to whatever they're experiencing. You could have people in horrible situations that eventually they adapt to it, and you'll even find comedy there. You'll hear stories from like people on the front lines where they'll be making jokes even though that there's terrible things going around them. But it works the other way. If your story is just joke after joke after joke, then it starts to fall flat, because people are just like, okay, that's enough.
I mean, let's put it this way. There's a reason that in most horror movies, the jokester dies. Like telling the joke, and you're like, he's a happy guy, and then he dies.
Or he's black.
Wow. See, I was thinking it.
No.
But there's a significant difference.
Hey, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's what happens.
Yeah, the timing of that was amazingly bad, considering what's happening like a block away. Next topic.
Yeah, next topic.
I have a tiara, guys, laugh.
So now,
Okay.
Let's move on to common pitfalls.
Oh yeah, we were doing that.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah. The punchline story.
Yeah.
Punchline stories can be, they can be good, but sometimes they're just not, because they kind of feel cheap. If you just sort of just tell the joke, like it's just a long joke. It's almost like a stand-up comedy act, because in stand-up comedy sometimes people tell like a 5 to 10 minute story, and then
it's just not
it
funny.
ends with a punchline. Sometimes it is funny, but when I'm reading fanfic, a lot of the time that I kind of feel like okay, I think you could have done something better with that. Especially if people see the punchline coming, then that's it. If your punchline,
even in a punchline story, you should make the audience's journey worth their while.
Yeah.
And you can certainly do that even if you're working towards really just a stupid punchline. Just using character-based humor, making people have laughs of recognition along the way, so that you're not just banking on one joke at the very end for your success. So.
Or you can do the build-up and then just like twist it.
Yeah, or completely.
There's a lot of people that like to start off with a ridiculous premise and then turn it up to 11 just slowly. Like Skywriter's done a few of those fics. And another thing, I mentioned this last year, but I follow a comedy troupe called Loading Ready Run. This is still a really good, Canadians. And yes, we forgive you for Beaver. Anyway, yeah. The Loading Ready Run, they have some really good skit ideas, and one of their main things is that they either like to put normal characters in odd situations or odd characters in normal situations, because the contrast is where the hilarity is. We see this in a lot of MLP episodes just by their own characters, and then we even saw it in the Discord episode. That, I think, was the biggest example of an odd character in a normal situation, or even you could even argue for the opposite, because his world and his thought process was highlighted within Make New Friends But Keep Discord. So I would just keep that in mind. And to avoid a common pitfall, I should actually integrate that, is when you do the opposite. When you do a normal character in a normal situation, it's boring. When you do an odd character in an odd situation, you have no frame of reference. You have no contrast. The gravity could be upside down, and if the characters are completely cool with it, I have some questions. So that, I think, is a really good pitfall that I think people should keep in mind, because there's so many stories that I read that just try to be lol to XD random, and it falls completely flat.
Yeah, one of the first things you'll learn about in Writing 101 is that one of the protagonists that are in your story has to be somebody that the reader can relate to. Like in The Lord of the Rings, you had Frodo Baggins, who really was just a normal person, a normal life and a normal routine, thrown into a fantastical situation, surrounded by characters like Aragorn and elves and dwarves and people and all these people who have these special talents and abilities, and he's just strung along for it, and we as the reader are seeing things from his point of view, and you have to do the same thing with any writing, whether it's comedy or not.
From a more comedic-centric example of that, you have Arthur Dent, for instance, from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He's just the generic everyman that the reader can associate with and can see this bizarre world that being introduced to through that audience viewpoint character.
Yes, that is a better example.
Having said that, though, like Helicopter Castle of Scootaloo actually, is basically they're taking in stride everything random. Mm-hmm. And it still works out. So, you can still break the rules. It's just, the easier it is to relate to a character, because in that, she had sort of a mission that you could sort of relate to.
Yes.
She wanted to marry that Rainbow Dash, basically.
Yeah, a common rule of writing is what a lot of professionals say, is that once you know the rules, you can break them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really good writers that have basically provided pieces that are timeless, because once they're aware of the rules, they can figure out how to subvert them, and it stays way more in your mind when you're used to all these rules that you have when you're writing. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone here agrees with me. You're used to just a specific mindset or a specific this or that, and then when something writes something that turns that completely on its head, it can be hilarious, and it could also just be very memorable.
Yeah. With fan fiction, it's a little bit easier because generally the audience that you're writing for already know who these characters are. Mm-hmm. So you can take them and make them act a little bit out of character, or put them in fantastic situations, and they already know who they're reading about. But what you need to do is, when you're writing fan fiction, if you want to write good fan fiction, you need to take a step back and look at the character and say, okay, how would I describe this character if someone had never seen the show before? And that's a good way to make it feel more real to anybody who's reading it.
A few points I want to go over is, one of them is random versus random. Basically, one good way to look at that is just look at YouTube poop. Most of it is random, as in it's not funny, but it's just lol random, and it kind of falls flat. But some of it is done really well and is actually really funny. We'll have a question period at the end. That's what we'll be using the mic for. So apologies for that. So just, it takes a lot of skill to pull off something that seems random. If it's really, really funny, then it likely is an extremely intelligent parody. Another thing I want to talk about is trying too hard to force humor in writing. It needs to feel natural, and you really need to be spontaneous with it. A lot of the jokes in my stories some of them are premeditated, and those ones I obviously work toward building and executing, but I have a lot of just throwaway jokes in there that just kind of come to me as I write the story, and I just kind of let them flow naturally. You've got to be in the zone, and sometimes, you're just writing and then you think of something that makes you laugh, and then you're like, oh, this would work perfectly in here.
Or enough puns to choke a horse.
Yeah, or just throw lots and lots of horse puns in there. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I think you should also be kind of disconnected with the comedy material that you have, because comedy inherently is very subjective. You're not going to make everyone laugh every time, unless you're like Louis C.K., but he's a god, and we will never aspire to him. But everyone has different types of comedy. Not everyone watches exactly the same comedy shows on Netflix from beginning to end. I like stuff like Archer and all of that. People might not like Archer, and that's fine too. But you have to be aware of not only what type of comedy you're trying to go for, but what the audience is that likes that particular comedy. Yes.
Okay, how many actual Archer fans do we have?
See, I pick good shows.
That's good to know.
Okay. And then I think one more thing that Gary would want us to mention is the rule of three, which is a specific rule in comedy writing especially, but it can also apply to any type of event in a story. But the rule of three is basically, you can tell a joke 3 times before it's not funny anymore. So you usually tell the joke once. People have never heard the joke before, so they usually get a laugh out of that. Second time, you change the joke a little bit, or you convey it in a different way to where it's not expected, because if you just tell the same joke again, it's already fallen flat. And then the third time, there's a few ways that you could do it, but the usual way is to either take the joke to its logical extreme, as we see with many Pinkie Pie episodes and MLP, such as Party of One, or you completely invert the joke. I can't think of an episode off the top of my head, but you can imagine what that type of thing would be like, where you have a really ridiculous scenario, and then it all of a sudden just goes the completely other way, and that's the hilarity that comes off of that. So that's usually what happens with the rule of three. Once you reach like 3 or 4, once you reach 4 or 5, that's when it usually falls flat, because you're starting to get into the area where the story is mulching the same material. And we're not Dane Cook over here.
Yeah. All right, the big payoff with the rule of three is the callback. And a lot of great comedians, you'll see they do the callback where they do a joke set up at the beginning of their act, and they do a whole bunch of other material, and then they do a callback to it, but they put a twist on it in some way that it becomes fresh.
Or they just very quickly reference it, and you remember the joke like very quickly, and then you laugh.
For example, with Too Many Pinkie Pies, we had all of our clones. It was a very exhausting episode to watch, and then it all gets resolved at the end. And when we watch Rarity's Boutique in Manhattan, and they're doing the interview, and then you see her clone in the booth behind them, that kind of a callback, is very, it's very effective. But you have to do it right. It's like a sprinkling, instead of a whole layer of frosting.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned that moderation, I think, is a good also general tip, and that's for every genre that you're doing. You don't want to have a completely sad story from beginning to end, because then there's no difference. Same goes with comedy.
Another thing with the rule of three is, with the rule of three, if you do something the same twice, it sets up an expectation. This is a bit different than a joke. It could be part of, like the rule of three in this sense is like the components of a single joke, where you do something twice and that sets up the expectation, and then when the audience expects you to do it a third time, you do something different, and that's funny. It's one of the really easy ways to get comedy. So if you do some rule of three and some odd couple pairing, like odd situation type of comedy, that's a good way to kind of start out and get your feet wet in the genre, see if you like it, see if it naturally flows from you.
Rule of three is good for micro-level gags too. If you're doing like a list gag, you can have something mundane, completely out of left field, and you have these two things to set up the expectation. So it's expectation, perpetuation, subversion, which is usually just very classic comedy structure. So yeah.
Yeah, there's that trope called murder, arson, jaywalking. That's probably one of my favorite tropes, where it's basically you're explaining why someone is terrible, and you say things like, he killed 5 people. He kidnapped a bunch of other people, And he also likes Spike episodes, like you just do stuff like that. Like I got a few, cool. But that's another.
I have nothing to add to this.
Yeah,
you know.
but that's what I mean by the rule of three. Is it's very general, and three is usually just kind of in our mind a really good number for things to happen. It's just I don't know why our minds are weird, but that's why people like it.
You know, you got the 3-act structure.
Yes.
Pony episodes follow the 3-act structure. You know, beginning, middle, and end. It's quite traditional that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
3 is just a lovable number.
So this transitions us into general tips. One of them is you winnie some, you lose some. And
I knew you were going to do that. You did that last year, and I still hate you for it.
He needs to do it one
so
more
then
time.
the third time, like if I come back here for how to make your words
Yeah.
hilarious 3,
No.
I'm going to do something different with it.
If you do it the third time, I'm just going to tackle
I'll
you.
just say
It's not going to happen.
I just
Yes,
start and then
there's subversion right
just
there.
tackles me off the stage.
I'll murder you.
So one thing is learn to weigh your gags because when writing my secret chipfic folder story, for example, there were a couple of gags I knew I really had to nail in order for the story to be funny. And if you don't find those gags funny, you're probably going to downvote it or not like the story or just whatever. It's not going to be worth your time. But if those ones are funny, then hey, it works. But there are a lot of little throwaway jokes that I put in there that it doesn't really matter if you get them or not. And because comedy is situational, you're not going to make someone laugh 100% of the time unless you're Louis C.K., right? So,
Yes, of course.
yeah,
The God incarnate, praise be by name.
Sometimes some of the best humor is the one that's going to fly over the heads of 99% of your
Oh,
audience.
yes.
And then it's just going to nail 1 out of 100 people, and they're just saying they're reading my mind. They know it. The television show Mystery Science Theater 3000 excelled at that. Just throwing so many gags out there, and this all of a sudden it's like something from your childhood that like you thought only you would know or that you were familiar with it. Growing up in the Midwest, it's like they're referencing like things that happened in Madison, Wisconsin. It's like the Fireside Theater. It's like, yes, it's a dinner theater. How would they even know that I do that? I didn't know about that. So yeah, you can be very specific targeted humor is okay. It doesn't matter sometimes if you miss, just put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely my style. A lot of my jokes are very much, for a very niche audience. It'll fly over the heads of 90% of the people, and only like 10% of the people will get it. But that's just, the way I like it. I only want the worthy to laugh.
Hipster. Yeah, the thing I like the most about weighing your gags is that you can give the reader a type of taste of what your type of comedy is when you're writing a specific story. I wrote a story called My Little Diamond, which is basically My Little Dashie, but it's Diamond Tiara instead. And within the first 1,000 words or something, you can kind of figure out where it's going because I set it in Portland, Oregon, which for those of you who are familiar with Portlandia, the show, basically in the show, everyone is so happy and everything that they just allow anything to happen. So it was like My Little Dashie, college student finds Diamond Tiara in a box, takes her to the store to try and buy her food, and everyone is just completely blasé about it. They're just like, oh yeah, the children's toys are over there if you want to buy it for your interdimensional space pony thing. And when you can put a joke like that in at least the first act or something, then the reader's like, okay, the story's gonna go this way. I kind of like this humor, let's write it out. And then if they don't like it either, then again, you winnie some, you lose some.
That's a good tip.
But there's a thing where you put the one joke, and even if it's just the one person that gets it, it's really validating.
Stop staring at me.
It's really, really validating.
Okay, I'm distracting you.
Anyway, what's next?
He's giving me the glare. We've already talked about the rule of 3. We've already talked about...
Brevity is the soul of wit. Shakespeare said that, and he, knew what he was talking about. Am I right?
Actually...
Well, he knew what he was doing. The problem that I'm going to...
Hang on a sec. If I get in, I got to do a little clarification
Uh-oh,
here.
I was
no.
mistaken.
The guy
He
who
needs to
said
correct
that
me.
line in Hamlet is Polonius, and Polonius was not a very trustworthy individual, so...
Yeah.
Take that for what you will.
The reason that I also want to interject is because there's a lot of stories that I have read, and I kind of just there's people who think that less is more in certain scenarios, and for some readers that is true, But like we said, comedy is very subjective. So it's quite possible that when you have less, the reader has less, and they might not be able to picture it in the same way. Or if you do the opposite, if you have way too much, the joke is just completely dead. It kills the pacing. So while brevity can be the soul of wit, there's a lot of shows that show this, such as just having a one-line response. Maud again, because she's amazing. But you see what I mean is that brevity is the soul of wit more when you know what you're doing rather than if you're just starting out writing.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, another point to kind of go off that is when weighing your gags, you also there's also the sense of actually like weighting them in how many words you are devoting to your gags. If you're going to devote a lot of story real estate to this gag that's not really important at the end of the day, then that can kind of make your comedy a little bit unbalanced. And
like writing 130,000 words just to make a liquid pride joke.
Yeah, exactly. And another one is figure out what kind of humor you're going for, and you want to be mostly consistent with that, because say if you're writing just like one of those like sort of lower brow comedies with a lot of like fart jokes and whatnot in it, then just randomly having dry English, political satire humor in there out of nowhere, that might make some people laugh, and if you do it really well, it might be genius, but most of the time it would probably just sort of leave your audience going, what? Because that's not what the audience was, sold on and what they were reading your story for at that point. Because when you write comedy, they try and figure out, oh, what type of comedy is this? Oh, this is my kind of comedy, and I'll go read this because that's what I like to read.
Yeah, there's nothing that a reader hates more, or at least in my eyes, when their time is wasted. And when you have a significant amount of time explaining a joke that's not funny, very frustrating. When you have a significant amount of time devoted to a story that goes the complete opposite way halfway through, very frustrating. So I just keep that in mind.
You just get frustrated, basically.
What?
You just get frustrated, basically.
I don't know what you said. We want to do Q&A?
You just give it to them straight.
If anyone else has other comments, then we'll do Q&A.
No, I think we can answer stuff with the
I'm just glad you
questions.
didn't do this, though.
So we'll line up at the mic like this. If there are any children in the audience, have them ask their question first.
If they have questions.
Okay, so just real quick before we start, in the interest of getting through as many questions as we can, if you have something to add to the discussion, please hold on to that until afterwards. Our panelists will be happy to talk to you after the panel in quiz and sofas.
The one thing I want to quantify, oh, sorry.
Please keep your questions PG. Thank you.
Yes, that too. And also, if your question is like, how do I do this in my story? Save that for quills and sofas, because it will take us 5 million years to explain it and give you a bunch of other reasons. It's just better.
And we will disagree.
And we'll always be, like, a bunch of the authors and anything, if you don't already know, are in quills and sofas, which is a room, like, right that way. And it's just a bunch of authors, editors, and everything that can provide viable feedback for your story.
Go.
Contraptionology, comedy, but it addresses a lot more serious tones and themes throughout it. But it doesn't do drama then comedy, drama then comedy. It is a comedy that remains funny while addressing more serious content. Advice from the panelists on doing that, comedy that touches on more serious themes.
Keep it light, keep it moving. I think, generally speaking, I mean, don't dwell. You can touch it. You can go there to give some interesting flavor, but don't. Just keep moving. Timing again is everything in that case. So I think.
In South Park, Kenny dies every episode without fail. This completely breaks the rule of three, but it's hilarious every time. So explain why that is.
Well, they stopped doing that, first of all.
Eventually, they eventually stopped.
After a few seasons, the creators willingly admitted that they were getting tired of killing him off, so they just stopped doing that. Like, he only, after like season 4, I think it is, he like stopped dying.
Specifically because of the rule of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a running gag, but,
Yeah, it was also a running gag, which you can kind of like reference gags and everything. They kind of made it like that, so we can give them a little bit of a pass, but even they admitted that it was getting stale.
The comedy wasn't that he was dying, it was the way he died.
Yeah, how he died. The
that
situation changed a lot, and running gags are different than the rule of 3. Definitely.
Yeah, the rule of 3 is more of a consistency thing than like you have to do comedy this way.
Yep.
Hello there. So I've taken scriptwriting classes at the Second City, and what a lot of Second City alumni have done is that they have been taught when they write screenplays, they try to get at least 3 jokes and 1 page. And you guys were talking about the density of jokes and density of sort of things, and due to the difference in the pacing of fan fiction, what would you say if you had to put a number to it? How many jokes a page should there be?
This is probably the most useless advice you can get, at least from me, but it's just however many is necessary. Sometimes you don't need a ton of jokes, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying about don't force it, because if you're forcing it, like, I must hit my quota of this many jokes per page. And
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what you're experiencing. Whoever's teaching you has to have something quantifiable to grade, and if that's the way that they're doing it, then that's the wrong method.
Yeah.
It really needs to be based on the situation.
Because when you have like this many jokes per page, it turns into like 2.5 Men, where you need a laugh track for people to realize that they're supposed to laugh.
Bazinga.
Whew. Well, that was exactly my question, so hi.
Hi.
Hello.
That's how you keep it quick, guys. Lightning round.
Yeah, you just pass the mic to the person behind you when you're done. Oh.
All right, well, this is kind of confusing, but suppose you have a story where the gag is essentially a character keeps trying to, let's say, make a recipe, but they keep failing. And in the end, the writer builds it up like they're finally going to succeed, even after the character is frustrated and just starts slamming pots and pans together. Would the funnier gag be to do the expected thing and let the dish turn out successful when they explode, or to do the unexpected thing and have the dish fail when they explode?
That doesn't really sound like a comedy, but I mean, here's the thing, though.
I think it does.
No. It doesn't sound like a comedy in the mechanical sense of it, because you'll always admire a character more for trying than you will for their successes. So even if they never get it right, the fact that they have tried so much is still something that people can admire about the character. Now, the way that they fail, if they fail by it bursts into flames, or it sends pots and pans flying, or it scares the neighbors, or however you want to do it. I mean, those can be funny, but that doesn't mean that the story itself is necessarily a comedy in that way.
I know.
Yeah. I think the way that I would have written that story is that I would just have the recipe be, like, whoever the character is, I would have them be overthinking the recipe. Like, maybe they just keep adding too many of one ingredient, or they add like a different ingredient, and then all of a sudden, like, maybe they wipe away a smudge, and then it's like, oh, it's 2 cups of flour instead, and then they freak out. There's a really popular story my buddy wrote called Perfect, I believe it was, where Princess Celestia is so perfect that everything she does is basically perfect. So, like, she tries to create a storm or something. Infallible, yeah, thank you. Yeah, hit that story up. It's really, like, he wrote it not intending for it to be comedy, but it's pretty funny as a result. I checked that story out and then write.
I think the most classic humor thing would be to have the eventual success and then follow it up with one stinger failure to suggest that the cycle of failure continues after the success.
That's pretty good too.
Or just build up that she's like going to try again and then just quits and does something else.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, microphone feedback.
It's
we
working.
meet again.
Yeah.
So you obviously talked about how timing is very important in comedy. Obviously with verbal, it's not as tricky as it would seem because people read at different places, but you can kind of control that with punctuation and indenting and stuff like that. But for physical comedy, when you have to, you can't actually see it, you actually have to describe it with words. Would it not be advisable to try and lean on that as your main, well, not main, but as part of your comedic routine, like having slapstick or any kind of physical comedy in a story?
Physical comedy is hard in fan fiction because you have to explain, like, me hitting Gary Oak. And
Exactly.
me saying that is funny, but I didn't actually do it, which would be funnier. Like, that's my entire point.
Yeah. Well, the thing with that is you have to write those kinds of scenes passively, where you're putting the active verb at the end of it instead of at the beginning. So, like, let's say Gary asks me to pass him a glass of water, but for whatever reason I'm already mad at him for something else, and he says, "Okay, so I passed him a glass of water with my fist."
Yeah.
And that's how that's physical comedy if you watched it happen, but that's how you have to write it. You have to have that punch be the last part of the sentence.
Yeah, the reaction, I think, is the best place to make it funny. The reaction to something that happened is where you can really make people laugh.
So
because, sorry.
Yeah, so it's mostly in the description and then what happens afterwards, not so
Yes.
much in the action.
Because the setup is going to be the setup no matter what. But the reaction is going to be the one that usually not only gets the reaction from the reader, but it's the one that you could change if you need to go back and edit your story.
Another piece of advice is how many words are you using to tell these jokes,
Yeah.
and that controls the pacing. Like how long does it take your reader to read the joke happen, and you have to kind of guesstimate that. And the problem is people read at different paces, so it gets subjective there. It's very challenging to write, but it's something you just have to experiment with.
Yeah, and you just kind of have to accept that stuff's going to get read differently.
Yeah, and just again weigh your gags.
Yeah.
If people don't find that funny, it's okay. They'll find your other like 6 jokes hilarious. So.
Good question, though.
Yeah, that was a very good question. Wow.
You mentioned inverting the joke to kind of keep it fresh and do that. Would you consider a good example to be like, in the show they kind of have this running example of a lot of Pinkie Pie's antics a lot of times end up being like useless or not contributing anything useful to their adventures, but then the one episode with the Paris Brides just completely solves a problem today. Would that be like an example of inverting it basically?
Yeah, it's kind of like playing with a running gag because she's a random character that keeps doing a bunch of random stuff. And in a lot of the episodes where it's not even focused on her, they're just like, oh, she's just being her. And then she saves Equestria in the Paris Brides episode.
Yeah.
Or she saves the world another few ways. Like it's kind of a way to play off of like a running gag of your character in a way. It's a better way to put it.
And that episode's a great example because she goes through the entire episode collecting musical instruments when the entire town is being destroyed, and they always just pass it off as, oh, well, she's just being Pinkie Pie.
Yeah.
And then it turns out the joke is she's actually doing something useful.
Because that's her character. And that's another one of the reasons that I think people like Pinkie Pie, is that type of character is consistent usually throughout all of the episodes, is that she's being really weird, but it's completely intentional. And there's hilarity in that.
And to go back on common pitfalls, a common pitfall is writing Pinkie Pie badly because it's really hard to write Pinkie Pie.
Writing Pinkie
really hard
consistently is really hard because people just want to say muffins and eggs and I like pie. Yeah, basically. They go full derpy. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Never go for
I just had a question about how you feel about like a mood whiplash in the story, because I'm not going to say the story because I don't want to be just self-promoting in front of everyone, but I just had a story that's mostly comedy in the beginning. It's like, oh, comedy, and then all of a sudden, one chapter, all of a sudden it's just sad, and it just switches up like that. Is that a little bit too much?
Well, we mentioned that the contrast is that it's good to have a contrast if you have a story that seems to be going one way for a while, but you also have to keep in mind that if it's tagged a certain way on FimFiction, people are expecting it to have a certain way. So if you have that ending, it can be very frustrating for a reader. I actually made the mistake of ending a story, or I had a mistake of beginning a story as a comedy and then rewriting it as a sad fic. And people did not appreciate that. So I would recommend actually combing through your story again and seeing if you could add a few sad moments just to kind of spice it up a little bit. It's like adding flavors to a cookie. You don't want a regular flour cookie, but I'd love a chocolate chip.
Either that or just brace yourself for the whiplash from the comedy.
Yeah, because part of it is you don't want to come off as disingenuous, which is really easy with a story like that. But if it works and that's the logical way it would play out, like if you're really upset by a story's twist ending, but you sit down and think about it for a few hours and there's no other way it could have realistically turned out, that is a good, well thought out twist ending. Horsevoice kind of received, that was like what he told me when he was talking about his rationale behind the ending to Biblical Monsters.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left, so rapid fire.
Thank you.
How do you do comedy when you're subverting the norm? Like, for example, like the comedy is coming from like this story is about Pinkie Pie as a crazy serial killer or something like that.
Usually you turn it up to the extreme, so you have her be really excited about murdering, but also have the murder be said in a silly way. Like, oh, they fell into a flower hopper, look at the bones crunch, it's so cool! And that's one possible.
Or just have her be really bad at it. Like, just keep trying to murder the one pony and fail every
like the, what was the Feeling Pinky Keen? That was that entire episode, is that Twilight is trying to figure something out and she just keeps failing miserably.
All right, next.
Okay. Also, karaoke is Kevin James.
Is what?
Kevin James.
Kevin James.
Kevin James?
All right. Well, which episodes like do you think are the best to like study to find like good points to maybe like use to make the characters like more comedic but still like true to themselves? Or just like which ones are the funniest?
Slice
to you
of Life
guys?
is good if you want to write parody.
Yeah, that's
Just
a good
because like it is canon and everything, and I know that there's mixed opinions on it, but the fact that it was written the way that it was not only completely intentional, but really smart on the way of Larson, considering the amount of love that we put into the characters, and that he just kind of decided what they were. Is kind of funny in a way.
Yeah.
Character comedy, I'd go with Party of One.
Less than zero.
Less than zero.
Less Than Zero is pretty good. Also, the recent Mod episode.
Yeah.
That was good too.
That one was really good. That was like my favorite comedy episode. So I checked that one out, the recent Mod episode. I forget the name.
I also liked Castlemania
You
quite
have to
a bit.
Mod Pie, yeah.
I liked Castlemania because Castlemania actually deviated from the traditional structure of the Pony Show, and it actually used a traditional sitcom structure. It had an A plot, a B plot, and then the minor C plot, and they all resolved it. And that was the first time I saw a legit sitcom structure, and I'll be talking more about that on my screenwriting panel tomorrow.
Yes.
All right,
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
This is sort of a mix of earlier topics, but when you have a scene in a story that you want to make funny, but you aren't really sure how to make it funny, and any time that you try to write it to be funny, nothing really seems funny to you, and so you start inserting elements that seem to work, but you get the feeling that it's overdoing it or underdoing it. How do you work through that situation?
I would just say if if it's clear that there's no way to make it funny, it's just not meant to be funny.
Yeah.
Like I mean, because if it's a part that's like integral to your story, and basically modifying it to the point that comedy is like a completely different thing that doesn't have relevance, there's no point to it. I mean, you'll just be funny somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, barring that, get somebody else to read it. Have a proofreader and ask them and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm intending to do with the scene. Read the scene, and I want to try and make it funny. You need to have somebody who looks at that scene who hasn't already read it 7 million times, because when you're in there writing it, you've seen every scene 100 times, and it stops being funny to you after a while. You need to say, well, I mean, is this funny? And then they look at it, yeah, it's funny. Or, no, this is what you need to do. And then when you put it in, then it starts to make sense. So really, having a proofreader is just good in general.
Yeah, it helps you solve that really bad conflict of, oh, are you being too critical of yourself and you should just ignore your inner critic, or is that your gut telling you, no, it doesn't want to be this, and you've got to listen to what a story wants to be. Sometimes you want to write a comedy, it ends up turning into something
The
else.
last two things that I would add is look at the dialogue and look at the description. If you can't make it funny either ways, scene's not meant to be.
That's it. Those are your only two tools.
What do you all think of fan fictions that are generally considered bad that get very popular status?
Welcome to the world.
Yeah. Life is
Twilight is really popular, and I'm not talking about the horse.
Yeah.
That's fanfic, baby.
Yeah. I mean, we're up here for some reason.
Yeah. That's three things, okay? Things that are good and things that are popular don't always overlap.
Yes. Life is not a meritocracy.
And whatever people might think, the actual truth of the feature box is not a quality measure.
No, that's true.
People thought that?
It's simply the feature box is simply based on a bunch of algorithms of what gets the most views, what has the most likes, what has the most comments, traffic. It's a lot of things, but it has nothing to do with anyone going through it and voting on stories and saying these are worthy to go into the feature box. It's all automated.
Yeah. I'm going to be really quick with this, but the thing that I want to mention is that you need to understand how to read a story, and you also need to understand how other people read a story, because there will be stories that'll be completely loved by their readers and completely hated by reviewers, and vice versa. And you just kind of have to realize how it's written and what people are expecting from that story. There are some just regular throwaway stories that are comedies that people are like, oh, I just wanted that joke and we'll get out of here. And the reviewers will pan that. And then, yeah.
All right, last question.
All right, I believe Cyborg, we're done, or do we have time for one more?
Last one, real quick.
Last one.
As you were writing like really heavy, action-heavy story, like for characters, danger awaits on every step. Is it better to strip it from every comedy than just put one chapter that's just makes everyone laugh every single second they're reading it, or just put a joke here and there and just keep on going with
I think
the
it
story?
depends. If you want, I think we touched, like you touched on it a little bit earlier, but like also Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman had this thing that when when a scene was getting dark and dark and darker, sometimes just a little bit of comedy would kind of lighten things down just enough that when you went back into the sad or whatever, or the action, it just kind of refreshes the reader.
Yeah.
So
I think the thing you have to be careful is that, and I don't want to sound insulting, but new writers cannot be consistently funny. We can barely be consistently funny. So you need to realize that the stories that are tagged comedy on FimFiction most likely burn out within a chapter or two if they're not a one-shot, especially when it comes from new writers. So you just have to realize that you can't have a consistently comedy. You need something else to fill in the holes.
That's a good point. I just realized that nearly every single story of mine that has a comedy tag is one chapter.
Yeah. It's writing comedy is like riding a unicycle. Eventually you can learn to do it, but when you fail, it's hilarious.
Yeah. And with that, we're done.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you.